This is a Triple J podcast.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Science with Dr. Karl. This week we got into your questions about itching, about scorpions versus spiders, and the best way to make sure a fart doesn't follow you around. I'm Lucy Smith. Let's get into it. It is a Thursday, so that means we are launching into Science with Dr. Karl. Every single week, Karl answers your science questions. So if you have one, text in on 0439 757 555, and you can listen anytime on the Science with Dr. Karl podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Now, last week, Dr. Karl, we had a question from someone who does night shift, and they do shift work, and they find that impacts their hunger. You had a bit of a follow-up on this one.
Sure. So I got home and there's the latest copy of The New Scientist with all the information I needed. And it was really surprising. Yes, when you do night shifts, your hunger increases, but for different reasons in men and women. In men, on average, you get more an increase in a hormone that stimulates your appetite. In women, you get a decrease in a hormone that blocks your appetite. You know that Ozempic semaglutide thing?
Yeah.
So you end up in the same end path, but by different, same result, but you get there by different pathways. And, of course, everybody's different in how they respond to these hormones. And the second thing I found really surprising was that in some people, 3 nights of night shift changes their food, insulin, glucose metabolism. So they go from normal to diabetic.
Wow.
In 3 days.
Wow.
Not everybody, just some people. And I guess the lesson is that the people who are keeping our society running by doing stuff between midnight and dawn, they should be treated well because they're shortening their lifespans for us.
That's so interesting. So women have less of an appetite, did you say?
So they both have more appetite. So men stimulate the hormone that wants to eat more. Women stimulate, they decrease the hormone that stops them eating. But you end up in the same place of eating more, but by different pathways. And this is only what we know now. We'll probably know more in a few years.
Goodness.
Wow, it was so surprising. So for I think it was our truck driver mate.
Yes,
yeah. Look, be strong, and it's a hard life.
Yeah.
We sympathise.
You can listen back to that episode via the Science with Dr. Karl podcast feed. Let's get into this week. We're kicking it off with Michelle in Byron Bay. Michelle, you got a question about itching.
I do. Hello, doctors. It's indeed an honour. Random question. My little 5-year-old grandson for his birthday wanted a back scratcher, and it got me wondering, like, apart from sweat, something touching the skin, what causes that random itch, like in the middle of your back?
You can, I guess he's not on medications, which can do that, but you can have little creatures come along that you don't see, and most of the time they don't bother you, little tiny parasites or bacteria, and their numbers can build up that you suddenly get this itch out of nowhere. You can have dry skin, which I cure with sorboline and 10% glycerine. He doesn't have psoriasis or dermatitis or
No, none of those things.
And you almost get that little twinge, just that little, quick, scratch my back.
That's sudden, yeah.
So it's probably either there's just been a build-up of something in that area that just reached a threshold and we don't know why, or none of the nerves are perfect and something just fired off when it shouldn't have. As an example, in your eyebrows, every now and then you'll get one hair which for 6 months just grows long and it never did it before and it never does it again, and you pluck it out and it's just gone. And we've just discovered something about itching being and scratching it is good for you. So they did some experiments with mice and they looked at their ears and they painted the ears with a chemical similar to stuff in poison ivy that sets off an itch, and then they either did or did not let them scratch. And 2 things happened. Firstly, when they scratched a little bit, not too much, when they scratched, that increased the inflammation, which in the short term is good, but also it increased the number of immune system cells. So scratching actually kicks your immune system into action, so long as there's a little bit of scratching, not too much. And then secondly, it actually altered the skin bacteria. I keep on going on about these bacteria living on us and in us, and you've always got a balance of mostly good bacteria and a few bad bacteria, and the good bacteria keeps the bad bacteria at bay. When you scratch for a little while, and don't do this all the time, when you scratch for a little while, the good bacteria increase in numbers and the bad bacteria decrease. But obviously, don't scratch all day. Don't think that if a little bit is good, more is better.
Yeah.
And if you've got psoriasis and stuff, don't go down the itchy, scratchy pathway.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Michelle.
you. That was interesting. Thanks very much. I'll keep itching.
Yeah. Michelle, just keep scratching. We've got Tim in Jindabyne. Tim, you got a question about recyclable products. Tell us more. What do you reckon?
Yes, I was wondering, when we consider grocery plastics, whether they're hard or soft, if we standardise and legislated to make them of the same composition, would we, and could we streamline recycling?
Yes. However, we live in a world where the environment is considered free. So a river that you can jump in and swim and catch fish from has the same economic value under our current system as a river that catches on fire every now and then, and you can't swim in it and you can't catch fish. So we're treating the world as a garbage dump, and as an example, the figures have just come through that in the last half century, we've dumped 1 tonne of plastic per person in the environment. That's 1 million grams, and on average, of those 1 million grams, we each carry 7 in our brain. 7.
Wow.
Right? And associated with that, we don't know for sure, but it does seem as though it's associated with the 50% decline in male and female fertility over the last half century. Think how many people you know are on IVF now, and how many you knew when you were in school. You know, the numbers have changed. So there's a lot of stuff we can do, but you have to identify the materials, and different plastics have different qualities. And by the way, everything that we do with plastics from fossil fuels we can do with the equivalent sort of product, but from biomaterials. We don't have to have non-recyclable ones, we can go recyclable. So you've got to identify the material. And what's diabolical is when you get like a laminate, where 2 things are melted together and you can recycle each one separately, but separating them is really hard. Then you've got to have cooperation across industry from all levels, heading for the goal. And I guess the simple goal would be that we end up with a world where every river you can jump in and have a swim and catch fish from. And so where you're heading down that pathway, then you've got to have the consumer awareness of what you're dealing with. And sometimes I just sit there crying, thinking, where does this plastic go? Does it go into that bin, or soft plastic or hard plastic? And you really want to recycle it and you find it hard. Then you've got to have the infrastructure going through and then the legislation. And of course, don't forget, every time you try and do something, there's always some bad side effect where you might make things worse. So it's an overall goal that has to be, we make the environment cleaner and let's head for that, and then we do what we can along the way. So it's a very worthy thing you've got there, Tim, and we can easily increase our recycling, providing we realise that the environment is not free. So that means a cost in the short term.
Yep.
And in fact, there's some branches of industry that seem to regard that anything is justifiable so long as they make a profit, right? And that's just plain wrong.
Yep.
Sorry to be depressing, Dr. Tim. But make the world a better place, Dr. Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Yes.
We've got Rob in Perisher. Rob, what's your question?
Hi there, doctors. My question is, how is it that whales and other marine mammals can dive deeper than steel hold and titanium hold, submarines? Is it their blubber that allows them to go down deep into pressure and compress?
You're off to a good start there, Dr. Rob. Blubber is part of it. Part of the other problem is that they have to go deep because that's where the food is, and so they've evolved over time, even though 40% of Americans do not accept that evolution is real, even though we do have problems with antibiotics because bacteria evolve against them. So they've got a flexible body, which is that blubber is part of it, but their rib cages are incredibly flexible and they can compress under pressure, and each 10 metres down is another atmosphere. So if they're going down 500 metres, that's 50 atmospheres, so their lungs have compressed by a factor of 50. So your lungs would have gone from 5 litres to a volume of a cup, 100 mils. They've also got muscles that contain lots of chemicals similar to hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is really specialised for picking up oxygen here and dumping it where you need it, and then the muscles can carry a similar chemical called myoglobin, which holds oxygen. They've got shirtloads of it. So when they're not breathing, they're then drawing on their stores of oxygen, where the oxygen atoms are married to the myoglobin, and they pull that off the myoglobin into their brain. And then they've got a unique circulatory system where forget the spleen. We don't need that. They just specialise to what they need. So the brain and a few of the sensors, the eyes, and then muscles, a few muscles for getting around and opening their mouth, and that's kind of it. And then when a whale finally then goes charging at a big pile of krill, it'll go charging at full speed, then open its mouth 90 degrees. We haven't got the figure for the blue whale. We have for the fin whale, the second biggest whale.
Yep.
When it opens its mouth, it slows down enormously and more than doubles its weight. The fin whale is 60 tonne. When it opens its mouth, it takes on another 70 tonnes of water. So now it's weighing 130 tonnes. It then closes its mouth, and then a mesh falls down from the roof of the mouth, and it squirts the water out, 70 tonnes. And out of that 70 tonnes, what's left is about a kilogram of krill. And it has to do that about 90 times a day. So like you, if you weigh 60 kilograms, you have to eat 1 kilogram of food. Well, they have to eat sort of 1/60th of their body weight each day.
Wow, thank you very much. That's amazing.
Charlotte said, also, whales expel all the air from their lungs before they dive, which helps them deal with the pressure.
Charlotte, you're wonderful. We love you, Charlotte.
We love you,
Please,
Charlotte.
Charlotte and friends, ring in with your wonderful answers. We love you, Charlotte. And maybe we'll send you a cardboard medal or something to thank you.
Are you going to make it?
No, I'm too busy. Sorry, but we love you anyway, Charlotte.
We got Jamie, in
Jamie.
Patterson here. Now, Jamie, you got a big old hypothetical. What's up?
G'day, doctors. My hypothetical would be I'm just working out on site and I've got a lot of trucks running back and forth over some grass here. It's just compressing it. And I was just wondering, would the Earth get any smaller if you were to put the Earth, I know space is a vacuum, but if you were to put it into a vacuum and compress the Earth and all of the sand and all of the soil, and how much smaller would Earth get?
Oh, it can go a long way smaller. So did you do atoms at school, Jamie?
Oh, roughly.
A long time ago.
Yeah.
So you know they kind of look like a mini solar system with a heavy lumpy thing in the middle and kind of something like planets, we call them electrons, going around. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then
I've got ya.
that's one atom, and then over there is another atom, and there's a big gap between them. So the first thing you can do is, with increasing pressure, you can then shove them really much closer to each other. And that's kind of the white dwarf stage, where something the size of our sun and the mass of our sun is compressed by a factor of 100.
Yep.
So that's the first stage, where you shove the atoms up close to each other. The second stage is when you shove the atoms into each other. The negative electrons mush up with the positive protons, and suddenly the whole thing gets a whole lot smaller. So you've got the solar systems as they were nudging up against each other, then suddenly you've just got the actual planets and the core. And you go then from 14,000 kilometres across from a white dwarf to 20. So we can go down. So that's another stage of contraction that the Earth could go through. And then the next stage after that is you can squash it down to a black hole where it's got no size. So yes, it is theoretically possible to do it, and we will have the technology one day to do it. Look up Kardashev's scale on Wikipedia if you feel like it. Do you have a follow-up there, Jamie? Did I kind of miss the boat or something, or are you happy with that?
No, that kind of makes sense. So, yeah, hypothetically, you're saying the Earth could get as small and as strong as a black hole if you were to squish them down and hard enough.
Yeah, you could squash it down to like a centimetre across or less, because there's lots of empty space available. It wouldn't be pleasant for us. You wouldn't be able to have a cup of tea with a slice of cake, but nevertheless, the atoms or the mass that was there would still be there, but in a different form.
Yeah, right. Oh, that's awesome.
Thanks, Jamie.
Thanks.
We've got Ollie in Sydney. Ollie, what's going on when you pluck your eyebrows?
Hello, doctors. Just wondering why every time I pluck my eyebrows, 100% of the time, I sneeze.
Okay, now, how can you be so brave? I just simply cut them, and it's only when my daughter Lola says, Dad, I say, okay, and how come you're plucking them? Because you're brave?
I don't know, I think. Yeah, just because I'm brave, I think.
Because he wants to make sure his face is snatched, Dr. Karl.
That's
He wants to
right.
make sure he looks preened, ready to go.
Yeah,
Okay,
gotta
so-
look pretty.
Okay, so firstly, big it up for you for looking pretty. Secondly, the answer is very simple. It's called cross-wiring. There's a specific name for this when you put a cotton bud in your ear, never put a cotton bud in your ear, and you sneeze, and that's called the Alderman reflex, Alderman. Sexist name, I apologise for DEI. Okay, right, moving right along. Counsellor, we should call it, but that's the name of it from the person. So that's one example of cross-wiring. Shove something in your ear, you sneeze, and then in that same sort of area on your skull, there's also cross-wiring potentially in some people, and you're one of those unlucky ones where there's a bit of cross-wiring, so you pull the eyebrow hair out, and then blow me down, it accidentally triggers the sneeze reflex. And the reason for that is that the sneeze reflex is really important. With food coming into your mouth, it doesn't matter, it comes out the other end a day or so later. Stuff going into your lungs, it'll stay there forever until the macrophages get rid of it, and they can't get rid of everything. So you've got this powerful sneeze reflex. In your case, it's just a little bit more powerful than it needs to be, and so you sneeze. Does that mean... When does it actually happen? In the act of pulling, or just after, or just before?
Just afterwards.
So then you can get one eyebrow out and then do it, and then you have to go back and do it again.
Whoosh, yeah.
Yeah, have a little sneeze, then go back to it.
That happens to my dad as well.
Really?
When I pull his eyebrow hairs out, and then he'll have to take a break and just whoosh, have a sneeze.
Really?
Yeah. Is that so? I find when I am getting my brows done and they're getting plucked, I'll get a little twitch in my foot. Like I'll get a little pang in my foot, and my foot will wriggle.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, you do know, based on the Mythbusters, the difference between science and messing around is writing it down. Writing it down. Have you written this down every single time you do it? No, because life's too busy.
Ollie, we got to write it down, okay?
You got to write it down. Yeah, but life's too busy. Don't write it down. I can understand it. Thank you, Dr. Ollie.
Well, Juliet, you kind of have, I guess this is the opposite of cross-wiring. Juliet, what's your question?
Hi, guys. How are you?
Very well, thank you, Dr. Juliet.
Good.
You've got the opposite, have you?
I guess so. I was just thinking about when you're moving your body parts.
Yep.
I know it starts in your brain, that thought, I want to move my arm, or even more so when you're doing something like dancing where it's really complicated. How does that actually reach your body, like that part of your body?
You have to train it. So our brains are so big because that's the thing that gives us an advantage from an evolutionary point, that they're not fully wired up. So you're born not fully wired up, and actually about 3 months early, and so you don't have proper sleep patterns. There's a whole lot of things that are not wired, and then you've got to train them along. And it's all potentially there in the DNA that if you're thinking, I'm going to move my finger, then somehow the consciousness, it sends a signal to a part of your brain. There's a crease in your brain called a sulcus, S-U-L-C-U-S. It runs across sort of from one ear to the other, and that's where your motor cortex is. And you send a signal that somehow comes out of that saying, you told me you want me to move your right finger, and it works out to send a nerve down your spine, and then across your brachial plexus in your shoulder, and then down the radial nerve, and then down into down the nerves into your finger.
Wow!
And so it's been told to go to a specific muscle. And by the way, your hand is a remote control device. Most of the muscles that run it are just underneath your elbow. And so it goes to those muscles and it tells you to lift your finger or not, and then you lift the finger. So it's done via nerves and then via the spinal cord, and there's a lot of stuff that you have to learn along the way. So if you're looking at a baby, for example, they can say A, but F is really hard. F, they normally only get around the age of 4 or 5. And if you try to say the letter F, you'll think that, my tongue is over here, but my lips are there, and my cheekbones are doing this, my cheeks are doing that. So speaking is the most complicated mechanical activity that any human can do, even more complicated than gymnastics. So getting back to the muscles, that's a small subset of that. The nerves in your brain, and we don't know the step. We do not know how it goes from, I feel like picking up that cup, to how does that then make your hand move in such a way,
moving,
and you open it up, and the fingers go apart, and the thumb's over here, and the other fingers are there, and then you clench gently, but with potentially you've got enough force to break a cup with your muscles if you use them flat out.
But it's quite magical, isn't it? I'd like to see it actually moving from like your brain down your arm, like you know, how it actually, I wonder if they can visibly see something in science or how they figured it out.
So fast.
I think YouTube would be your friend on this case. And there almost certainly would be some neurology people that have done a video on it. So they should text into the magic number here.
Yeah, 0439 757 555. Have you been able to see this
Thanks,
in
guys.
motion? Thanks, Juliet.
Yeah, it would be pretty, I think.
Oh, it'd be lovely.
I love that. It'd be pretty.
Yeah.
Let's get into this one from Mitch in Eeyore, Sydney. Mitch, you got the aircon going. What's up?
That's right. I got a book signed from Dr. Karl recently, and I don't think I spoke a single word. I was so nervous. So I was to actually speak with Dr. Karl for the first time.
Oh my God, Mitch, and now here you are on national radio talking to him and the nation.
Thank you. I'd like to ask about aircon. So I'm trying to do my bit by the environment and turning it off when I'm comfortable, and then when I feel hot again, I turn it back on. But I've read online and people have told me that it's more efficient to run it constantly throughout the day. But it doesn't make sense to me because it seems that the energy would be leaking in through the walls at the same rate regardless. And whether you turn it on when it's hot and there's a big spike in energy consumption, or if it's flattened out over the day, it would be the same or even less if I turned it off. So I'm just wondering what Dr. Karl thinks.
I would tend to run it when you need it, cycling it on and off, combined with insulation, which is probably not an option if you're stuck with renting or if you're having a cost of living crisis. So at our place, we've got a heater, and we then put in 20 centimetres of insulation under the floor and in the walls and in the ceiling and double glazing. And before, the heater used to run continuously, and now it would only run for 10 minutes. And it would keep the temperature nice. And our heating bill went down by a factor of 6 to 10. Now, unfortunately, you're stuck with the fact that in Australia, the housing standards are very low. You might have heard of the 5-star system for rating houses. It's actually a 10-star system. A 1-star house has the insulation properties of a tent. A 10-star house needs $20 a year for heating and cooling. The average for Australia is 1.8, right? So on one hand, you're stuck with the fact that you've got a poorly insulated house, but overall, you're better off letting it ripple through the day, be uncomfortable for a minute, and then switch it on again. So switch it on and switch it off and switch it on. However, you can die from overheating. So in 2003 in Europe, 100,000 people died from a heat wave, 80,000 in Paris alone, and they had to store the bodies in ice cream factories. Pakistan every year since 2015 has had a heat dome. Thousands die every year. We've got in New South Wales, in Victoria, when we had the big bushfires about 10 years ago, 137 people died from the actual flames, and about double that died from the heat wave. And the only way you noticed is, well, there's no signs on a body when it's dead, and they might be a bit frail, they might be a bit older, but the way they noticed was that all the morgues were full. So once again, the ice cream factories had to kick in to take the bodies. So, but the good news is that we can reverse all this, keep carbon in the ground. So in the short term, take care of yourself, keep the aircon on. I know it's hard, and the grid hasn't kept up to date. We've been lazy on that. And if the worst comes to the worst, PSA coming up, head for a shopping centre, a library, or even a movie, and don't die. Because we still haven't had the peak heat waves come through.
Cool. I'll keep those blinds closed and just do what I'm doing then.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for clarifying
keep
that.
the blinds closed. And also, I did a story about fans. It's coming up on Shirtloads of Science. It turns out that I wrongly thought that no matter what, if you had a fan blowing, it would actually be good for you. But if the air temperature is above 40 degrees C, turning a fan on will put you into cardiac distress. And there was somebody with the name of Ollie J at the University of Sydney who is a specialist in thermal physiology, and they had to cut the experiments short because they were running the risk of killing their subjects. So I always thought, so a fan below 40, probably good for you. Above 40, probably bad for you.
Oh, my gosh.
There's subtleties to this. Just keep fossil carbon in the ground.
Thanks, Mitch. We've got John in Wollongong here.
Dr.
John, what's your question?
John from the Gong. It almost rhymes.
Hello. How are we?
Very good. I love talking to people from the Gong.
Excellent. I'm a first-time caller, but long-time father. And I've had this issue for a very, very long time with my wife where I've been arguing consistently about it. Now, the situation is we sit there, watch TV, whatever it is, then I've got to do a fart. And she says, go away. So I go away, do my fart in the other room, and then walk back. And then she says, John, don't walk back. It follows you. You stink. So what I started doing was I'd walk away, pull my underpants down, just far enough, do a fart, take a couple of steps away from it, and then snap them back up quickly so that I've actually walked away from what I've left behind, walk back in the room, and then sat next to her. And she's like, John, what are you doing? Get out of here. And I've explained to her what I've done, but she doesn't believe me. So can you clarify if what I'm doing is correct or not?
You're heading down the right pathway. And by the way, it's not just terrorists that fart, but everybody farts. There is an app, if you're keen, called Chart Your Fart. It's an Australian-made app, and you go online, and they've got various options for rating your fart. And there's a word that they've got there called Linger, L-I-N-G-R, which rates for how long the fart hangs around. So this is where you and your wife could actually rate it.
But I don't think it stinks because I can't smell it anyway. But the question I've got is, is it following me back? Because if I do it in my shorts, then obviously it's seeping out through, my shorts and my undies and everything, and following and gradually coming out through the porousness of my clothes. But if I drop it straight away and I'm not actually wearing any clothes and step away from what I've just left, and nothing else is coming out of me, and then I snap it shut, then walk away.
Do you walk away quickly or slowly?
I'd say at a normal pace, whatever that means.
You've got to walk slowly. So do the experiment. Get somebody like your wife or somebody to walk past you quickly. And as they walk past you quickly, really, really close, really quickly, you'll feel a breeze. And there's a bit of a vacuum behind them.
Yes,
so
negative pressure.
So the first thing to do is to try to compact your volume to zero, as we discussed earlier in the day, but that's probably impossible. The second thing is to, I know this sounds weird, turn sideways so you've got less cross-sectional area, then scuttle back slowly like a crab, but do so slowly. Because you will be drawing some of the fart gas behind you. And it would be worthwhile for both you and your wife to go on to Chart Your Fart app, and so that you can both rate it. So remember, the difference between science and screwing around is writing it down. So this way you'll be writing it down on an app.
Yeah, righto.
And you can contribute to Australia's greater knowledge. And surprisingly, 43% of Australians think they fart too much, which is weird because if half the people do something that is what half the people do, then isn't that normal?
True.
I know
I think
it's
fine.
tricky.
I have no issue with it. I just don't want to offend her or have an argument with her.
What a nice person you are. Yes. Oh, you're such a sweetie.
Keeping it contained, John.
Go sideways. So come back away from the fart slowly and sideways.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll give it a crack and I'll ask how we go.
Step away from the fart, John. We've got Charlotte in St Kilda. Charlotte, a very fitting question. What do you want to know?
Dr. Charlotte, welcome.
Hi, doctor. So I was wondering what the difference is between FM and AM radio.
It's the way you carry the information from here to there. So, in the old days, in Rome, they would sometimes shave the skull of a slave bald and then tattoo in some information and then let that hair grow back. And so they'd go, and if they were caught by the enemy, well, there's nothing to see. So the information is transferred from here to there on a carrier. Now, imagine you've got a carrier wave going through space. It goes up and down like a wave. We call it a sine wave. It goes up and it goes down, it goes up and it goes down. And it's always the same distance apart from one peak to the next peak to the next peak. In AM, you add your audio signal on top of it, so now you've still got the same wavelength from peak to peak to peak to peak, but there's ripples on it. And when you pick it up at the other end, you suck off the ripple. You suck off the carrier wave, and you're just left with the ripples, and that's the audio. In FM, you bring them further and closer apart. So the peaks, instead of being the same distance apart, they're really close or they're further apart. They work at different frequencies, and for various reasons, FM has greater audio fidelity than AM, so it sounds much higher quality. And if you tune, now I'm going to go completely off track. If you tune your FM radio to a station where you're picking up noise, and you might be able to do this with your radio, it might not let you because it's all digital and intelligent and running us all. But if you tune it to just off the station and you hear static, 1% of that is the energy left over from the Big Bang. So you can meditate on that like in the old hippie days, people used to meditate on lava lamps. Oh my God, did you know that lava lamps are used to keep 10% of all internet inquiries safe.
What? What do you mean?
Okay, so you walk into a building called Cloudflare. Sorry, Charlotte, have we answered your question yet before we go off into lava lamps?
Yeah, absolutely. I was also wondering, what's the benefit of AM then if FM has better audio?
Cheap. It was the first one they came up with, cheaper technology. They came up with AM first, then FM around 1920. You need, and also you choose up more bandwidth, so it's a bit more expensive in terms of potential resources. But the quality is better. Okay, so now that I've got diverted, you walk into the offices of a company called Cloudflare in San Francisco, and you see these lava lamps on the wall. There's about 20 of them across and 5 down, so there's 100 there. And a lava lamp they were invented in 1963, and then they spread across the world, hippies, drug culture, cannabis, and then they came in and out. And then people started using them for internet security around 2002 and then fell off, and now they've picked up again. So you go into and in each lava lamp, you've got a blob of wax in some sort of liquid, and the wax has been adjusted to be almost the same density as the liquid. So the wax is at the bottom, you turn it on, it heats up the wax expands and rises, and as it rises it cools, then it falls down again. And if you stand in front of it with your body, it picks up a bit of heat from your body. So what it does is, not much, but just a little bit, and what it does is different. You've now got something that's truly random, and if you stand half a metre away from it or 1 metre away from it, it'll do different things. Now, randomness is a large part of internet security. As a crude example, suppose you put your credit card number down to buy a mop bucket and you put in the numbers 1, 2, 3, whatever it is, and then it multiplies that number by a random number. And you've got to guess that random number. And it's got hundreds of digits, maybe thousands. And to guess that could take you, years and years and years. And that random number, in 10% of cases, comes from a wall of lava lamps in the Cloudflare office in San Francisco.
What?
They have a camera pointed at the blobs. If the blob is here or there, it's a 1 or a 0. And so that's how they generate their random number from lava lamps.
Oh.
Isn't that weird?
That's so weird.
How do we
so
get onto
it is
this?
based off of something at least.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So 10% of internet searches have their security ensured by lava lamps. But then when we get the quantum computers, this is the sort of problem they can fix really quickly. So we'll have to come up with a new way of having random numbers or computer security.
Let's do Nicole in Tasmania. Nicole, what's going on?
Hello, doctors. I was wondering, why are some people, like myself, more susceptible in picking up accents?
So, Nicole, obviously we can hear you got a British accent. Have you always been British, and you're currently in Australia and picking up maybe an Australian accent?
Yeah, so I've been in Australia for about 10 years now. I've definitely got a bit of a twang, which I'm not unhappy about. Mm-hmm. But I've had other people, friends and family, who have been here for years, decades, and not even a twang, not even the no, not even that.
No.
Okay, so firstly, the younger you are, the easier it is to adapt your accent across. And then secondly, being exposed more helps you adjust more. But then there's social factors. So if you happen to talk to your family on video conference every now and then, they say, oh, Nicole, you've picked up an Australian accent. Subconsciously, you might go against that. Then there's personality. It does seem that this is a soft psychology fact, a soft one, that if you're more extroverted and outgoing, you're more likely to be able to successfully mimic people. But that's a soft one. And then there's a whole human variation which covers a multitude of sins. And I have noticed that Scottish accents are really prevalent for long times, as well as South African accents. And I had as work experience a student from a school in a suburb of Sydney St Ives, where there's a lot of South Africans. I said, oh, you're from South Africa? And he said, no, but practically everybody in my class is. So he had picked up a South African accent without ever going to South Africa.
So it's just some people are more impressionable. Is that it?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of things. I think we need a linguist type person here. Now, I think I might have made a mistake with the aircon. There was some mention there. Yes, please.
We had Hans, an AC technician, text in. He said it's better to run your AC constantly on a higher temp when cooling. All compressors are inverters and ramp up and down. Very efficient. It's worse to chase the higher ambience by turning the system on and off. So we were talking about whether you should let it run all day or whether you should turn it off to save energy.
Okay, it could well be that I'm totally wrong. I was going from first principles, whereas Hans works in the field, and that's the advantage of ground knowledge. So, Hans, if I could bring you back, that'd be later. And I could be wrong on that. It has happened before. It'll happen again. Thank you, Hans.
To see. We've got Venus on the Sunshine Coast.
Venus?
Venus.
Is that the first person we've had called Venus?
I think so.
You're my first Venus.
It wasn't a very nice name when I was in high school, I can tell you that. I wasn't very popular with the name, but
I
don't mind it so much now.
We love you, Venus.
Thank you. First time caller, massive fan, Dr. Karl. And we've got a question. My son and I watch a show called Bug Wars. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a crazy fun show to watch about. It's like about insects and bugs and, how they attack and how they kill. And we were just wondering because they're very venomous insects, the ones that we watch. And, for example, like if there's a scorpion and a very venomous spider, that they attack each other. And if the scorpion attacks the spider, with its venom, the spider dies. But then it goes on to eat the spider with the venom in it, like the spider's venom, and the scorpion's fine. It doesn't die. So we were wondering why.
The stomach acid's the factor. So just to clear the words up, venomous means that this poison of whatever it is injected into your flesh, whereas poisonous refers to a chemical that you swallow. So when they inject, the chemicals that they inject are optimized to travel into the muscles and then through the tissue planes and do specific things to the muscles and survive in that potentially hostile environment. And if you swallow it, those same chemicals, if you're lucky, will get broken down by the acids in the stomach. And then they'll get broken down further in the small intestine, assuming that the insect has that. And then finally what's left is something that's not the same as what was there first. It will get into the bloodstream, but it's been processed, and now the chemicals, which might have had a big chemical with 1,000 atoms, might be, say, 20 chemicals with 50 atoms each, and so they're less harmful. So the stomach acids will, assuming that the insect has that, will neutralise the venom.
Okay, I'm going to tell my son that, but I'm not going to say that you told me that, so I can just look like the cool mum.
Yes,
you are
Venus.
Cool, Dr. Venus.
Is it?
A name like Venus,
I know that.
cool.
Yeah. Thanks, Venus.
Thank you, Dr. Venus.
And last question, we got Hugh in Newey. Hugh
in Newey. Love Newey.
What's your question?
Yes. Good morning, doctors. Great opportunity here. Thank you. Look, about 15, 20 years ago when I was getting my braces, there was a wire which my orthodontist used, and strangely enough, when he made it really cold or cooled it down significantly, it made it more malleable. Now, my whole life since then, I've never been able to understand why this certain material became more malleable as it got colder, because that goes against normal material science. And I wanted to please consult someone like yourself, please, Dr. Karl.
Dr. Hugh, you've come across the thing called, or the field of knowledge called, materials science. And yes, you're 100% right. In general, the hotter something is, the faster the atoms move inside, the weaker the linkages, the softer and more malleable or being able to be changed it becomes. But if you go to a lot of trouble, you can find, for example, an alloy, and I think they normally go for nickel titanium. Is that what they used with you?
Yeah, look, that sounds pretty well, pretty corrosion resistant against all that stuff.
Yeah, so it has a property that it becomes more flexible and easier to manipulate when cooled. So they'll cool it down and then mush it onto your teeth. And then for the rest of its life, in your mouth, it's going to be sitting there at 37 degrees C. So they've gone to a lot of trouble. The field is called materials science. It is just this enormous field of knowledge, and they've managed to find something that goes against the grain.
Okay, excellent. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Hugh.
It's kind of like saying it is what it is.
Yeah.
But in this
It
case,
is what it is.
It is, yes.
We are wrapping Science with Dr. Karl here. If you want to check out more, you can do so via the Science with Dr. Karl podcast, wherever you get your pods, and we are on YouTube as well. Head to youtube.com/Triple J. Dr. Karl, I'll catch you next week.
Peachy Keen, catch you then.
And that's it. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Science with Dr. Karl. If you have a question for him, you can ask him via the Triple J text line 0439 757 555 from 9 a.m. Thursday, Australian Eastern Daylight Time, before we go live at 11 a.m. Or maybe you just like hanging out here, part of the podcast fam. Wherever you get your podcasts, make sure you liked, subscribed. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/Triple J. I'm Lucy Smith. This episode was produced by Josh Brennan, and we'll catch you next week. See ya.
Dave Marchese here from the Triple J Hack team. Hey, if you love Dr. Karl's podcast like I do, you might enjoy the Hack podcast as well. Each day we bring you the news that matters to you, from the latest science on climate change to what's happening in politics and news around the world. The Hack Podcast. It's your daily fix of the news you need to know. Get it wherever you're listening now.